Hey movers, shakers, and the stuck but curious. I'm Freya Gordon, and this is Good Shift, the podcast that helps you figure out what's next in your career and make a move with confidence. Hi friends, and welcome back to another very interesting episode of Good Shift. If you're thinking of or dreaming about quitting your job to start your own thing, this is a story that will show you what it looks like to make a shift and actually begin. Today's guests are two friends, co-founders, and first-time entrepreneurs who made a career shift not by burning everything down overnight, but by listening to the quiet signs that their jobs weren't how they wanted to spend their days when they were 40, and giving themselves permission to explore something new. Elan Halpern started her career in tech, working as a product manager after studying computer science at Stanford. She was on an amazing path, high-achieving, fast-paced, and structured, but found herself building software products that she didn't care about, feeling increasingly disconnected from her work. Kiki Couchman, also a Stanford graduate and Elan's best friend and co-founder, was working in private equity, a world of long hours and high pressure. It was a great career with a clear ladder to climb, but she began questioning whether the version of success she was chasing was what was going to make her happy. What began as Elan's personal journey with gut health and habit of making yoga in her kitchen for health reasons evolved into a bigger conversation between the two of them. Over time, they went from questioning their paths to testing an idea to co-founding Benny, an organic, grass-fed, and truly probiotic yogurt. In this episode, we're going to unpack what it feels like to grow out of a professional identity, how to navigate the overlap between your current career and what you want next, the mindset shifts that made it possible to step away from corporate safety, and how to create space in your life to build something that can fulfill you. If you're in a job that looks fine or even amazing on paper, but it doesn't feel right inside, or you're thinking about starting something of your own, then this one's for you. Elan and Kiki, I'm so excited to have you on the show for our first ever episode with a duo. Welcome to Good Shift.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So exciting to be here.
We're recording in New York, the home of these two and Benny, so great to have you on the show, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with that moment that something shifted. This is obviously all about the pivot moment, this podcast. So, Elan, you were working in tech as a product manager, and Kiki, you were in private equity, but something wasn't working for the both of you. So let's start in that leap moment, not when you quit, but when you started to feel like it was really time to take a leap and get those feelings. So Elan, we'll start with you. What did that misalignment feel like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kiki and I were both at our companies for 4.5 years before we made the leap to full-time on Benny. And throughout that time in the beginning, we actually loved it and we're super fired up and we worked a lot. We were actually roommates in after college. We were living in San Francisco together.
Is that where you met?
We met at Stanford at a nutrition class and kind of bonded over our shared love of health and food systems. But later on, after graduating, went on to live together in San Francisco. And so right out of college, we were both living together, working at our jobs and definitely hustling. Sundays were work days for us for sure. But over time, you start to, both the company grows and that's very changing. At least for me, I joined the company when we were 10 people and it was kind of a rocket ship startup. And by the time I left, we were over 200 people with an international office. So it got really, really big. And so both the scope of work change and the depth of work change. But also I started to think about what do I want my career identity to look like and what really drives me. And I think Kiki and I are both people who really throw ourselves into work, and what we spend time on working actually really matters for our personal lives. I think a lot of friends even treat work as work, and then they have their passions outside of work. I think at least for me, whatever I was doing for work had to be aligned with the passion. And over time, it became really clear that the product that I was building, I just wasn't that passionate about. And really, it came down to the fact that it was a B2B SaaS company. And so I would go home every day, and the product just didn't affect me. It wasn't keeping me up at night. It wasn't kind of itching a problem that I was trying to solve. And I could do 1 million user interviews and build an awesome product, but I just wasn't going to have a full stake in it, in the user experience and whatnot. So that was kind of the big click for me, was realizing that I was leaving work and just not obsessing over the product in the way that I wanted to for work.
You mentioned that your work was always something that you wanted to be fulfilling for you rather than just having passions outside of work. Did you always want it to be, or did you start to come across that realization later in your working life?
I think what I realized after graduating is that, like, you're now in life. Like, for the first 18 years of your life, it's pretty structured. You go to school, maybe you have extracurriculars, and then the moment you graduate and start working full time, you've now, like, entered this state of life, and, like, how you spend your time is totally up to you. Like, no one else tells you how to spend your time. And what I realized is that actually, like, work, you spend more time at work, especially if you're at a small company that demands a lot of you. You spend more time there than you do with, like, your partners, your friends, your pets, your family. And so it became very obvious that, like, because I'm spending so much time on this, I actually really want to care about it, and it has to be fulfilling for me in that way because I'm in this, like, age of life. Like, this is just, like, the rest of time.
That makes complete sense.
Can I just add something that jogged within me? I'm sort of dropping back into that feeling of what I had when I was starting to feel misaligned with what I was doing. And a huge thing that you just said was like, okay, you're now in life. And something I thought a lot about was, okay, this is my first job. Pretty soon, 4.5 years in, it's no longer your first job. And this is going to turn into your career. And so a huge question I continued to pose to myself was 10 years from now, if I stay in this job, not only is this a job for me, but it's started to shift my identity over those 10 years. I never thought that I would be in private equity. And after being there for 10 years, yes, you learn a lot, but you also absorb a lot from that company and from that space you're in. And I had to really look hard at myself and think, is this the type of culture and place and industry that I want to absorb the identity of? And I think for me, it wasn't the case. I think there was something that I wanted to be much more aligned with in my values and my passion to actually apply myself and spend my time in that way.
And how far through your job did you start having these feelings?
It was honestly like, I don't know, 1 year ago from today? The 4-year mark.
I have this thesis that, like, everything happens in, like, 4-year increments. Like, you're in high school for 4 years, you're in college for 4 years. Everyone's vesting schedule at their company is 4 years. And so, like, at these 4-year increments, you start to think about, like, okay, do I really want to keep doing this? Am I ready for a pivot? Do I want to double down? Like, it's just kind of a natural reflection point.
Yeah, because I think you're right. In the first year, you're just getting used to actually working. And even if it's a new job, you've been in the working world before, you're still acclimating to what this environment is, what the politics are, how do I be successful in this environment? The next year, you can absorb so much more because of that, and you can own a lot more, run a lot faster, all of those things. And then I think the third year, at least my experience, was really creating impact with that. So actually now, how do I leverage this within this environment to create a lot of impact in the ways that I want to? And then the fourth year was, okay, do I want to keep doing that? Are there new areas for me to gnaw on and create more impact and more spaces to carve out for myself? Or is it time to move to the next place? And so I think that's where we really hit that in the timeline.
And do you guys think that other people that were surrounding you, your friends or your colleagues, were starting to feel this way as well? Or is this something that was a bit more of an individual feeling for both of you?
I feel like everyone was sort of, at least in our kind of graduating year and adjacent, was going through this. And I think a lot of our friends either switched jobs, went to go start their own companies like us, or went to business school. And, you know, very few, I feel like, stayed put and stayed at their jobs beyond that 4-year mark.
Yeah, it's also like I joke, it's our quarter life crisis. Like we're having this moment of actually looking ahead. And I think there's a very real thing that's not, I don't know, as I think upfront spoken about, but I would love to have a family. And I think what that means is as a woman, you have to start thinking about in your mid-20s, where do I want to be financially to be able to have that option when I'm in my young 30s or mid-30s or whatever your timeline really is. We actually, unfortunately, do have a timeline. And for me and for a lot of my friends and peer set, that's a big thing. Is this the job? Is this the place that I want to continue accumulating? Can I accumulate wealth? Do I want to do something on my own and have some time runway ahead of me before I actually have to think about starting a family and be responsible for other people? So those sorts of questions also really have been coming up with our friends as well.
And so given that this was something that a lot of people were going through as well, is this something you were talking openly about, both of you?
I think as best friends, we were both feeling these same feelings of slight discomfort in our current jobs and not feeling alignment. And we were having many honest conversations with each other about that, both to sort of express and reflect and have that open space, but also to challenge each other and find what was next. And through that, we really came to Benny and to starting the yogurt company. But I think that's just an illustration in itself, is us leaning on each other about this.
Okay, well, let's dig into Benny then, because I'm excited to get into this. So before Benny was an idea, as we dipped into at the start, there was a phase where something had to shift. So let's talk about that time of reflection and what helped you choose what was next. So we'll start with you, Elan. You mentioned that there was a 3-month reflection period before Benny. So what did that look like for you and what did it involve?
Yeah. And I think now, like looking back on it, it sort of fell down into these 3 categories. And then like, I feel like I've told this story to so many people and talked about it that like I had to codify it. And so I've now like broken this down into what I call the 3 Ps. And this is really how I like reflected upon what I want to do next, both like, am I ready to leave and why? And then like, what is the thing that I actually want to throw myself into? And the 3 Ps are passion, product, and pay. And so that reflection period really centered around those 3 things. First was like, what am I passionate about? And the way I went about actually trying to seek that out was I looked at how I was spending my time outside of work. And it turns out the vast majority of my time outside of work, besides social things and friends and whatnot, was spent on doing research and learning about the health space. And whether it was like running these little biohacking experiments or making my own yoga or like doing these fitness challenges, whatever it was, I realized that like I was kind of obsessing about the health space and probably should align my career with that industry. So the passion side was a really important thing. The product and the pay thing I can get into later, but yeah, I don't know, Kiki, you want to chime in on your side?
Of my reflection, I think the passion thing is a huge part of it. Another thing was, what are the experiences that I want to accumulate? Like, what are the things that I'm not learning right now through my career and that I'm actually not learning also beyond in my personal life that I want my professional life to be a vessel for. And so that was another thing, was sort of what are the experiences that I want to have? And then what are the environments in which I thrive in? And I think per Elan's comment about the growth of her company, we also had that growth when I was at my firm. And I realized I actually really love the creative early stages of a company. And so I want to be somewhere small. I want to be somewhere agile. I want to be somewhere where when we make a decision, we can put it into place tomorrow. And so those 2 things I think were also huge factors, was sort of the experiences and then the environment.
And how did that reflection period look for you? Did you also take 3 months or was it longer, shorter?
It was a similar timeline. We were very much like in this together.
We were
like,
so in this together.
We would send each other companies that we were interested in.
You were both looking to go into other companies as a possibility at this point too.
Definitely. We were both having our own individual conversations outside of our current companies. And we were reflecting always back to one another about this. And I think that's like the truly true part of us being best friends is it's not that we were good friends and Elan presented me this idea and we decided to work on it because we were good, people to work on it together. We went through this journey of exploration of what we should be doing next together without ever the intent of starting a company. Like, it was never the goal that Elan and Kiki were going to be starting a yogurt company together. The goal was, what are we doing with our lives? As best friends, we want to understand each other and to witness each other and to allow each other to grow and to challenge each other. And through that, we realized, oh, actually, this is the thing that we should be doing. And so I think all of those questions are literally the same for both of us.
Yeah.
Like we experience this timeline together in the same way. Yeah.
I love that. It's like a friendship therapy set.
It is.
That's
yeah.
been
It's truly
led you through to building a company.
I would also add that, Stanford, which is where we both went to college, it definitely like pills you to be an entrepreneur. Like they breed entrepreneurs. That is like a part of the bloodline and the culture. And I think that there are kind of 2 types, maybe some fluidity in between, of entrepreneurs. One is like, I want to be a founder at all costs. It doesn't actually matter what the idea is. And I will just like shoot my shot on any idea as long as I am the founder of it. And then 2 is I've stumbled upon this idea that no one else happens to be working on. And I'm really excited about that. And I think Kiki and I are much more the latter than the former, where we were actually very down to join another early stage company and work for them if it was an idea that we were passionate about or a product we were passionate about. But we happened to stumble upon this problem space that no one else is solving, and we were like really fired up to solve it. So that's kind of like how we were like, let's do this together.
So after you'd both done your about 4 years in each place and you're thinking about what's next for me, how are you dialing into what's going to feel purposeful and what's going to feel like you're taking a next step that's going forward in terms of purpose rather than ending up where you were?
I think it's a lot of trial and error. Like, I think we actually had a lot of conversations with other types of companies and we would report back, and there'd be, Elan would have a lot of conversations with health tech companies. I was having conversations with other funds that were doing sort of similar things, and realizing, actually, this isn't it. So allowing us to narrow down through external conversations and exploratory. And so I guess that's sort of the counter to your question, is it wasn't actually honing in on yogurt itself, but it was definitely eliminating within the space. And I think that was a first step that was really, really helpful to do, is just understand the market and understand where your interests align in the market.
Yeah. And I'll just add, like, there were a couple of really big unlocks that I had in that 3-month reflection period. One was that I realized that I really wanted to work on a product I'm a core user of, especially as a product manager or as a founder. Coming from B2B SaaS, again, I would like close my computer at the end of the day and like literally not think about the product because it was never affecting my life. And that made me realize, okay, I actually want to work on a product that I have I use every day. Not only will I be more passionate about it, but I'll also just be better at my job if I can actually think about how I can improve it all the time. And so that was like a big eliminating factor. I think the other question that was really, really important, that sort of like the nail in the coffin on why I knew I was excited about Benny above everything else, was like, first, when you come across an idea, whether it's your own idea or someone else's company, do you think it's a big opportunity? Do you think that there's a market for it? Do you think that it has the potential to succeed? And more often than not, in the health space in particular, the answer is yes. Like there's so much to be done in the health space. I think there's like a ton of exciting opportunities. The real question that helped me was, when I think about what it's going to take to actually get there, am I still excited? What are the challenges that I'm going to have to go through to make this successful? And am I still fired up about tackling those challenges? And for the vast majority of ideas, the answer was no. Whether it was lobbying down in DC to get health policies changed, or even like raising VC money to recruit and poach AI engineers for personalized healthcare. Like there was so much there that I was just like, I'm not that excited about those ideas. Until we landed on Benny and I thought about the challenges we were going to have to face in order to make this successful. And all of the answers were yes. So I think that was like a big clarifying moment for me.
Yeah, I love that. You're thinking beyond the dream and into the realities of what it's actually going to look like to get there, which is important because it's easy for us to get swept away in a whole lot of different things. And that can mean that it then ends up just lasting a year or something like that, which is totally fine too, to dip your toe into things. But it just makes it a lot easier to go along with it when you've committed to the challenges from the start. So, Elan, you started to make yogurt for your own gut health. What made you take the idea beyond your personal health?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I woke up one day, it was like a Saturday morning. I like jumped out of bed at 6 a.m. And this was after having gone through all of these questions and reflections and talking to Kiki all the time and talking to different companies. And I had this, like, for lack of a better word, like come to Jesus moment that was like, wait, like, what if I started a yogurt company? And the reason is because we realized that if there was a yogurt on the shelf that did what mine had been doing for me for the past couple of years, I would buy it. Like, I like making yogurt, but it was sort of a means to an end. It was like, this is really effective to helping me heal my gut and my friends and family when they partake in it too. And I think there's like a sort of like a empty space on the shelf where you can have a yogurt that's an everyday food that actually is really, really beneficial for you. So the next day I like went over to Kiki's house on a Sunday. She was like doing a puzzle by herself on a Sunday. I was like, Kiki, like, I think I know what I want to do finally. And I like told her about the yogurt company. And then like from then on, it was just like, we were kind of locked in.
Yeah, so how did you get brought on board with this, Kiki? Because obviously like Elan has this cool, crazy idea, but what makes it feel like it's actually a viable idea to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think she proposed it to me, and at first I was like, yeah, for sure. And then it was, oh wait, give me a month. Give me a few weeks to think about this and sleep on it. I mean, I think it's like any decision. I think we are now starting to understand what we don't know, of course, because we've now been in it for almost a year, just sort of dabbling in this idea. But at that point, like, we didn't even know what we didn't know. Like what Elan said, like, yes, that sounds so shiny and great. Like, are the challenges that you need to face to get you to that dream actually something you feel excited about doing? We had no idea what the challenges were that we actually needed to do to make Benny a reality. And even still, there's still so many that we don't actually understand. And so my first sort of thing to get comfortable with, my first order of business was, let me talk to actually people who have done this before and to actually understand what is the road in front of us here that we are about to embark on and that I'm committing to. And also that we're committing to together, because also we're friends. And like, do we want to be co-founders? And I think, the gut answer is yes, but I want to make sure that I feel actually really good about that. So I think that was number one, was like, let me just make sure I do my homework and my research. I think two was actually, no pun intended, the gut feeling of this actually just feels like a perfect melding of my identities. And I now say it to friends and they're like, this is the obvious thing for you to do, Kiki. Like, of course you're going to start a yogurt company. And that sounds so outrageous and nobody would have dreamed that. But now that we see it, it feels like the right next step. I grew up in Northern California. My dad grew up on a dairy farm and my cousins actually still run the dairy farm and have grown it a lot. And I didn't grow up there, but I grew up in agriculture, in and around like an orchard and lots of vineyards and all of those sorts of things. And I went on to study human biology at Stanford because I was really passionate about how do our, food systems and like the planetary health actually affect human health and what's that interaction. And so to be able to sort of step away from private equity in this more charted path to go back to food and the impact on our nutrition felt like a really natural place for me to go.
That's so cool. It feels like you're coming home.
Totally.
Making it full circle.
Totally.
So if you're studying biology at university, how did you end up in private equity?
Yeah.
You must get asked that a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people do ask that. The normal path to private equity is you spend 2 years in investment banking and then you go into private equity. And most people study economics or, something along those lines. My firm is actually fairly different and thinks that if we find smart people, we can teach you private equity. It's not rocket science. What we can't teach you is your EQ, your IQ, your will to win, your grit. And so we're going to hire for those things. And then, we hope that we are also hiring for a good growth mindset and that you can sort of pick up everything that we are teaching you about private equity. So they're one of the few firms that actually hires out of undergrad because they don't actually think that investment banking period is necessary. And they also want folks who have lots of different experiences and lots of different educations because there's not a one-to-one in terms of what you're actually doing in the real world. As most of us know, like how much do our majors really apply? Not a ton.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
And I've heard you mention, Elan, I think that at Stanford, the expectation is that you're going to start some sort of tech company or something like that. So how did you guys feel going into the health space? Did that feel like you were having to break expectations at all?
I think it's far less about health and much more about a physical product and not a venture-backed company.
I see.
So I think that those are the two things that I feel in the lowest low moments, like I have so much less validation around, is that, we're starting something with a real supply chain. We were just talking about it's here in the US, and that's great because of the political situation and the uncertainty around that. But it also means that there is real logistics and just operations that need to go on with this type of company and this type of physical good. And I think that is not something that's the norm out of Stanford. The second is we're choosing to bootstrap this and we're not raising any money. And, we see money as a real tool to get to wherever we want to be. And so there may be a time where we do want to raise money because that's going to be important for us to get to the next milestone. But at this point, that's actually not necessary. And yet, like many of our, Stanford cohort, we don't have anything to fall back on saying we raised, X number million from this fancy VC fund in the Valley. And so you have to have a lot of conviction in yourself to be able to say, this is the right idea. We have no backing behind us, and we're about to bring a refrigerated perishable good into the world. And that's how we're choosing to spend our time. So I think that's the hardest shift that we had to get comfortable with.
Yeah, it definitely took a while, especially like coming from a background in computer science and working in tech, to like relinquish this expectation that I have to start a venture-backed, venture-scaled company. Like that was my, if I ever were to start a company, it's going to be in software, it's going to be venture-backed, venture-scaled. Like that was just like a given. And so releasing that expectation was like another really big unlock for both of us, I think.
Yeah. And we do have there is one company, I think, that helped us a lot in the beginning. And there are two of our close friends from Stanford. They started a clothing company, and they're sort of the only model, I think, within our peer set of founders at Stanford that have done something that looks kind of similar to what we're doing. And that was really a guiding light for us in a way, was to see this has been done before, they can do it. And, they have had the same resources to tap into and the confidence to go and build something super successful and very aligned with who they are.
Yeah, I'd love to dabble a bit more into what that support system's like for you, or what the mentors have been like for you both, and how important that's been. Has that been a big part of your journey? Like, let's think about family and how they felt about the decisions you were both making. Obviously, you're both in great careers, which a family is typically very happy about because you're doing well for yourself. You're off the family's plate now. And so how did they feel about this, and what sort of mentorship and guidance has really helped you get to here? And do you think that's been a big part of the journey?
Well, I think that there's always a little bit of like, really, kind of, like, you guys really want to do that, especially because we were doing well at our other companies, and probably could have stayed on that track and stayed in tech or stayed in PE. I think especially from older generations, they're like, well, how are you going to make money? And we're like, yeah, like, good question.
Figure that out.
Super fair question. But I think in general, our friends were really supportive of it and felt like our strengths in particular really aligned well with what was, set in front of us, which is also why I think we were excited about working together, because we knew each other's strengths as friends. Like, if I were to start a software company, I'd probably immediately try and find like an engineer co-founder. And Kiki wouldn't have been on that list because she's not an engineer. But with CPG and working on a physical product, I think you have to do two things really, really well. One is just like what Kiki was talking about, operations and logistics. It's really just a big execution problem, and can you execute? And then two is, can you market the heck out of it? And I felt like those two things were very much within Kiki and my wheelhouse. And I think all of our community and friends agreed that those were the things that we could actually tackle.
Yeah, I agree. I also think, for me, if I were to get super tangible about the people who are, mentors and advisors through this process, I think my parents were huge ones, particularly my dad, who grew up on a dairy farm, to be a reflection of, this is actually the experience of the people you're going to be working with. Like, you are no longer going to be working with other people who went to Stanford or who went to Ivy League schools and who are, investors or engineers or whatever that looks like. You're going to be working with farmers and people working on the factory floor, and that can be amazing and so fulfilling, and know that that's what you're shifting into. You're not just here to market a product, but you're actually here to run the operations of a business and work with hourly workers. And that looks like a very different thing than what we're used to. And so I think those were very enlightening conversations with me, to just be very honest with what I'm stepping into and what the challenges are that we're stepping into. And then I think other peers who have started companies before. So my partner he's a co-founder of a venture scale tech company in AI, so like a different
mold.
Yeah, exactly. And though, to watch him build a company and to watch the highs and lows, it can be really hard and challenging to watch that, but also sort of gave me the confidence that I also can do this too. And I think there are very real conversations about what it looks like in the early days, and then how that shifts, and how your responsibility shifts, and how you might be feeling about that, or whatever is necessary from yourself. I think that was really helpful too, is to be intimately sort of a witness to what that looks like in other people's lives.
I'd love to hear a bit more about confidence, because you two both seem to have had quite a lot of confidence in pushing forward to do what you're doing next. Has there been times where your confidence has faltered? And can you talk to us a little bit about that? And also, what do you think drives the confidence that you have now?
Yeah, there's definitely been times. I think, there's so much we don't know. Like, we have no experience in the physical product, perishable food space to date. Well, now we have a little bit with Benny, but like prior to Benny, we really didn't. I think at the same time, what really drove the confidence and conviction on it from the get-go was the fact that, yes, this is extremely hard, and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of energy and a lot of creativity, but it's not rocket science. Like, we're not trying to invent something that's never been done before. We're working on a product that's been around for like thousands of years, and we're sort of building on top of that. So we stand on the shoulders of giants a little bit, and there's some playbooks that we can kind of reference and play off of, as opposed to saying we're going to do something that no one's ever done before, or invent something new that no one's ever done before. And I think that was helpful in terms of confidence of like, okay, people have done this before. There are resources we can tap into. There are mentors we can look out for and really learn from them. But there's still tons of moments where we'll call each other and be like, this is crazy. And
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that it's actually really helped that we've worked in the world before too. I think that if I were to start right out of undergrad, I would have known how to work hard to get a good grade, but I don't think I actually would have known how to work hard in terms of creating an outcome and an impact. And I think having those 4.5 years under my belt of understanding what it looks like to own things, push things through, like execute, grind through it, actually has given me a lot of confidence that we can do this together and that we actually have the ability to do this, because even though we've never worked in this space, we do have the ability to work really hard and get and achieve great outcomes. And so I think that's a really important part of it. I feel like the biggest thing, I mean, personally, that I get flagged on my confidence is I have to be on social media every day. And
you
I
do
think,
such a good job of it.
thank you, Freya. But I think that that can be one of the sort of like, it's not even that it flags my confidence. I think it's just sort of that embarrassing moment that I am continually faced with, is looking at myself and having to decide, am I putting this out in the world? Okay, I'm putting this out in the world. All right, everyone's judging this. And now I've got to double down on the fact that I made this decision. I quit my job. I'm starting this yogurt company and I'm talking to you about it every single day. And sometimes, you know, as somebody who has historically been more of a self-aware person, I'm very aware that this is like I have to come out really guns blazing and really, really with full conviction and sort of no wavering in my confidence about myself. And that makes me uncomfortable sometimes. And so it's not quite the like flagging of my confidence, but it is a little bit of a weird identity shift that I've had to go through.
I really like that you brought that up, because a lot of people and what they're trying to do have that issue, especially with social media, how they get themselves out there the first time. It might even just be posting something or putting their face out there. So for someone who is thinking about starting to do that and it's like, how do I do it this first time? They're so concerned about what everyone else is going to think. I think a lot of the time we're more concerned about what the people we know are going to think than what the rest of the world is going to think. What's some advice you could give to them there to just get started?
Yeah, totally. I mean, first of all, it sucks. So I hear you, because I also felt like that at first. It just is really embarrassing. But you then have to shift that mindset to think, actually, this isn't embarrassing because I'm doing this in order to be successful. And there's a real goal that I have here. And our goal is, we don't want to spend money on influencer marketing. We don't want to spend money on meta ads. How do I make sure that we have the reach and we can achieve that through really no money at all, but just sort of my time? And I think if you have a clear goal in mind as to what you're trying to achieve, people really see that. And I think even if it might be cringe sometimes, they can admire and they really respect that in you. And I have felt that deeply from my friends, from my family, from my community, from now a much broader community. And I think that has really allowed me to continue moving forward without ever having to feel like, ooh, this is a little uncomfortable. And then the other thing that I would say is, you just need to start. It's way, way easier to tell yourself this is embarrassing and you're bad at it when you've never done it. But until you've done it, until you've posted 300 videos, no one can tell you you're bad at it or you're good at it. And actually no one will know. And so you need to just get out there and actually do it, or else, you know, you're just judging yourself for something that you haven't even put out into the world.
Amazing. Thank you. I think a lot of people will take a lot from that. Take action, people. Okay. So leaving something stable is not a clean and a tidy decision. As we know, it took you guys a lot to get there. So let's talk about Benny's inception, what that process looked like, and while you were still working your other jobs on the side, how that looked. Elan, do you want to talk us through how you managed your energy, balancing both work and startup life, and what boundaries or habits helped you in that overlap season?
Yeah, definitely. So I call this like our 6 to 9 period, because we'd work on Benny 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. before our jobs and 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. after our jobs. And so it was definitely like a sandwich between our full-time jobs and kind of hard to split brain between it. But that's sort of how we found the time. And there was a couple things. Like, I think one is our goals during that time. It comes down to like the second P I was referencing before, where passion was kind of we figured out, and then this is like the product one. Our goal in this part-time area was like, how do we build conviction around this product before we jump into it full-time? Like, what are the criteria? What is the information, user interviews, all of these things that we can do ahead of jumping into full-time to build conviction that this is the right thing to do and that this thing has legs. And so that's sort of like how we structured the work that we wanted to do in that period of being part-time on it. I would say in general, like, it was hard. And I think that the trade-off that we were making was, look, we can move a lot faster if this took 100% of our brain power. And really, Benny was like 30 to 40% of our brain power, not 100. But it felt like it was worth us building that conviction over those several months that we were part-time on it before we went on to go full-time.
And as we were just talking about before, you were both in office jobs, so it wasn't easy to just be slotting it in your day-to-day. Where did the sleep come in? How did you manage to balance your health and anything else in between this?
I think generally Kiki and I are balanced people, but it kind of reminds me of when I was in college. I was an athlete in college at Stanford, and we were always told that you can have, if there are 4 things that you care about in college, 1 is academics, 2 is social, 3 is sleep, and 4 is your sport. You can only have 3. That was the rule. It was like,
brutal.
You can have 3 of those things. So, I mean, for me at the time, it was like I lost sleep. I was on the rowing team, so I had to wake up at 5 a.m. So sleep was the thing that I compromised on. I still was like very social. I still tried a lot in school, and obviously the sport wasn't going anywhere. So sleep was a big one. I think in this Benny phase, like it was a little bit of a similar trade-off where we were spending a lot of our free time on Benny, which means some of the other things a part of our lives, whether it was sleep or social, had to get compromised.
Let's be very clear. It was social and not sleep, because Elan is a huge sleep person.
I'm a big sleep
She
person.
has changed her total habits, and now she's a huge sleep person.
I've become bullish on sleep since, but yeah.
Well, you need a lot of time to recharge between everything that you've got going on. So, Kiki, for someone who is trying to build something on the side while working full-time, what are 1 to 2 things that you would tell them to focus on?
See if the messaging lands with people. Tell every single person in the world that you interact with that you're doing this and that you're interested in building this product or whatever it is that you're interested in building, and just gauge their reaction and see if it lands. And I think that's been one of the best things that we did, was we told every person what we were doing, and then we asked, do you know anybody else who's doing something similar? And we got connected and we started building our network in that space, but then we were also able to interact with individuals and see if the messaging was landing. And because of that, we've been able to iterate our messaging 500 times, refine exactly what the product is, because you just can't be afraid to put it out in the world and to see how it lands with others.
I really like that, because I feel like so many people who are starting something on the side, they don't want to talk about it because they're nervous that other people are going to have their opinions that they're not quite ready to hear, or that people are going to shut it down. But it sounds like that's been one of the most valuable skills for you both.
Totally. I mean, I even think about it with building social media. I mean, I would say we're still, the clock still hasn't started yet until we're in our first grocery store or done our first production run. It hasn't truly started. And this has just been a way to test, is the messaging working? Actually, yeah, it's resonating with, 18,000 people so far, and people are coming back and back and back, and they're highly engaged. And to us, that's huge. That's huge. And that's really good and important data for our company, and as we continue to grow it in the direction we grow it in.
And how did you keep the momentum going before it has become anything, right? Like, you've obviously got product now, but there's been a lot of community building. You haven't had your official launch. So how do you both keep that momentum when you don't have something like truly physical to show for it yet?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a question that we often get is, you're culminating to a moment of launch. And I think I would flip that on its head and actually say, it's not building a momentum to a endpoint. We're actually just pulling up the hood and showing what's happening throughout the whole process. So yes, in a way, this is a way to spin up demand. So that way on the day of our launch, we have 100 people lined out the door and they're all ready to buy our yogurt. But actually, it's just a way to make customers much more engaged and much more bought into a product, no matter what stage the company is at. I would hope that 10 years from now, if we're still working on this product, that we're still explaining how we came to this decision, why we're scaling internationally, what's going on, and why we decided to expand into this flavor profile and this type of drink and this type of yogurt, because that's all part of the experience that I think many people don't get with the commodities and with the groceries that they consume.
Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson to anyone building something, that, there is this whole background that goes on, and there is a real opportunity in terms of, especially these days with social media, to really put that out there and bring people along on the journey. And you guys have done such an amazing job with that. And I would highly recommend that anyone listening goes across to the Benny Instagram and checks it out, because you'll get the full story, like everything we don't have time to cover in this podcast. You'll be able to see everything. So for anyone wanting to build something and wanting to get some inspiration and see what really goes down, it's the perfect place to go.
Just to add to that, I feel like our community has been like somewhat of a third co-founder, so to speak, where it's like Kiki and I will be like, oh, we're kind of stuck on this. Like, let's just post about it. And then like, so it's been kind of like a superpower in building this.
Well, actually a key example of that, which we were just talking about before, is you're going through a name change, which Elan, do you just want to give us a little bit of background on and how you've gone out to your community on that?
Yeah, so we are going through a little bit of a name change. We ran into another company that's been around for a bit longer than us and has already launched that has a very similar name. It's same name as Benny, just spelled slightly differently, but it's phonetically the same. And so we decided, since we're pre-launch and more flexible right now, it makes a lot of sense for us to sort of damage control and make moves on a name now, as opposed to in a year after we've already launched and are in grocery stores trying to shift that down. So we're in the process of brainstorming a new name. It's been very fun and creative and definitely like a different side and ambiguous, but we're entirely activating our community on it and getting a lot of really good ideas, actually.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a great opportunity for us. I'm very hopeful that we'll come up with a better name through this process. So as much as we're sad to sunset Benny, I think there's a real opportunity for we've shaped the brand over the past 6 months. And so, Benny still fits the brand, but is there something that actually fits it better? And then I think sharing that story with the community of folks who are already really bought into our story as co-founders and to Benny Yogurt itself has also created a ton of empathy and a lot of understanding for what it means to actually build a business and why it might be another few weeks until our yogurt is actually in the grocery store shelves. And so being upfront about those challenges actually can do you a lot of good when it comes to, the customer experience and your relationship with your customer as well.
And I'll drop in the show notes by the time this actually gets released, because I know you guys are on, I think it is 14-day time frame to change your name. We'll drop it in the show notes so everyone can easily find it. And I'm very excited to see what it is.
I am too. Let's be clear. We're both very excited as well.
I just want to dig a little bit into the thoughts behind a soft shift, as I call it. So there's obviously like a hard shift, which is where you just jump into something and you leave it all behind and you take that big leap. But what you guys have both done, soft not being that it's passive at all, because it's absolutely not, but just being that you've eased into it by doing both on the side, which in a way is also not soft at all because it's way more chaotic because you've done both. But that allowed you to have the security still of your old job and continuing to make some money while you set something up. Can you talk to me about the benefits that you see around that, or maybe if you would have done it differently in hindsight?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we would have done it differently, actually. I think it goes back to what I was saying before, like, what are your goals in this phase of being part-time? And for us, it was like two things. It was one, like to build that product conviction. And, we started by doing 50 user interviews with people on their yogurt consumption behaviors just to understand, like, why do people buy yogurt? Like, what are the key motivators, and really dig into that. And then the second is like transparently like the financial part, which is like the third P in the product and passion and pay is the financial part. And, the reality is that being that we're not a venture scaled company and we're going into the consumer business, we're probably making no money for the next 2 years. And can we put enough savings aside from our full-time jobs to like pay for rent, to pay for our biggest expense for the next 2 years? And so that was very much top of mind going into this like full-time switch, was like, actually, how do we make sure that we're financially stable in order to be able to do this?
Do you have anything to add, Kiki?
I was actually just going to say, I don't know that we really did a soft shift. In some ways, I look at a lot of other peers in this space who are in CPG, and so many of them actually have live product, and they're, shipping out product, and they're having to go to their 3PL and all this stuff, and they're working through it while they're still working their normal 9 to 5. And, we, of course, had a period where we were doing both, but nowhere near where we actually running a company. We were standing things up so that way we could run full speed ahead come January, just a few months ago. But I think in that interim period, we were sort of taking everything for a walk, seeing if the messaging landed, making sure our company was set up, that, all the things were in place so that way we really could run. And I don't think I would have done that differently. I'm really glad we had the overlap there.
That's actually such a good point. I mean, you've got to the phase now where you've got product and everything, but you're not selling full time. So
totally,
you really have taken quite the leap.
Yes. I think it would be very different if we were, marching around to grocery stores and trying to sell full time while still in our normal jobs. Yeah.
Can you talk to me about a moment in the shift where you felt really challenged or uncomfortable? This might be like letting go of the old identity, letting go of the pay, having to tell people that you're starting something new.
Yeah, I've definitely leaned a lot on institutions as part of my identity and validity of being a successful, smart, XXX whatever person. And so I think it's been a huge thing that I am, a straight A student. I went to Stanford. I worked in private equity at this type of firm. And realized how much I leaned on those institutions to help other people really inform their own opinion of my identity. And now I have none of that. Like those things, yes, I did do those things. But currently, if someone asks me what I do, all I say is I'm starting a yogurt company with my best friend and watch them form an opinion of me based on that. And I think that's been a really uncomfortable part for me to really reckon with. Uncomfortable mainly because I've never wanted to view myself as somebody who cares a lot about the institutions I'm part of. And now I'm realizing that that's something that I've actually inadvertently leaned on a lot.
I really like that you raised that because it's something that so many people end up feeling when they're in a corporate career. Like, it doesn't matter what you're building it in, but you're building an identity of some sort, not even just a corporate career. Let's say it's a doctor. Yeah, and then it might be like a lawyer or whatever that may be. And it's got a certain status around it. And you've gone to college and you've worked for this. And then that's how you're able to identify yourself and that you've done well. And so it's definitely something that a lot of us feel and hold on to. So I'm really glad that you raised it. People are not alone in feeling that way, and there is a way to get through it.
Yes, yes.
Did anything stand out for you, Elan?
Yeah, I think I honestly think we're going to face this a lot more as we get deeper into this, where we bring our yogurt to retailer or are doing a demo and people are like, I don't like it or I don't want to sell it. And that's happened like here and there, right? Like we'll demo to 100 people at an event and like a couple people will be like, oh, I don't like it. And maybe they just like don't like yogurt. A lot of them are just like, I just don't like yogurt. And we're like, okay, so you don't have to like it. That's okay. But adjusting to that of like, yes, there will be a certain percentage of people who actually just don't like what we're building and don't want to carry it, and navigating and understanding that and not having it feel like it's a personal attack on what we've built as like, our brainchild is going to be an interesting thing to navigate.
Okay, so we'll just get into a wrap up. We'll just do a few quick fire questions. So if you could both go back and give yourself one piece of advice before making this change, what would you think?
Something that became really apparent to us as we got into this was that talking to people who are even just a few steps ahead of us is like orders of magnitude beneficial if it's like 30 minutes of their time that will save us like 3 weeks down the line. So I think doing that early and often and not being afraid to reach out to people who are a little bit ahead of you really, really makes a big difference.
And then just ask for what you want. There's so many times, I've said this so many times, is to talk to more people about what you're actually doing, but then just ask the question. Do you want the intro to that person? Do you want to, understand all the resources in their brain? Do you want, what do you want from this person? And people want to help you. And so be very upfront and clear about what you want and how they can help you.
Well, I like that we've returned to some of the key things we discussed earlier. So it's bringing it all back. And is there a book or a podcast that either of you would recommend that would be really helpful around mindset shifts, starting your own business, making a change, anything along those lines?
I just read Be Ready for When Luck Happens by Ina Garten. And I don't know that it was the most profound book for me in terms of getting me to a place where I wanted to quit my job. But it was really resonant in that her story, I don't know if anybody has listened or watched Ina Garten. I used to watch Ina Garten on the Food Network all the time growing up. And her story of leaving sort of DC and a classic, more corporate world to actually go start a grocery store, a specialty grocer in the Hamptons. And now she's wildly successful. But that idea of having to shift and go off onto her own path, I think was just really resonant with me and just made me feel seen in that I'm doing something crazy, but it's been done before.
That's a great recommendation. Thank you. Anything for you, Elan? No pressure.
I don't know if I have a book or a podcast per se, but I will say, like, going back to what we were saying earlier, like talking to people that you admire or, you look up to the path that they took and just like unpacking their story and pulling on all of those threads, I think was really helpful in terms of, why are you doing this? Are you happy that you did this? Like, what regrets do you have? What would you change? What would you do differently? Like those types of like in-person podcasts, so to speak, I think were invaluable for me.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it sounds like you're interviewing for a podcast in that. So it's a podcast of sorts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you both so much for coming on and taking the time in what I know are your very busy schedules, busily building Benny and working out all of these kinks along the way, which is really exciting. So we'll all be following along with you and I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you, Freya.